The grand audience chamber of the celestial spire shimmered like a dream carved from ice and starlight. Pillars of polished obsidian stretched toward a vaulted ceiling where constellations, real ones, drawn from the sky beyond the palace's force field, twinkled in silent reverence. At the heart of it all sat Empress Velara of the Zanari Dominion, her sapphire-blue skin glowing faintly under the ambient luminescence, her long white hair cascading like frozen silk over the high-backed throne forged from a single shard of meteoric crystal. Her eyes, large and luminous with violet irises, surveyed the assembled court with regal detachment, until they fell upon the lone human standing stiffly near the eastern archway, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. His name was Joran Vale, and he was hopelessly out of his depth. A former scout from the Terran Frontier Outpost Theta 7. He'd been dragged into this gilded nightmare after a botched peace negotiation turned into a chaotic skirmish that somehow ended with him saving the life of one of Velara's younger cousins. Now, instead of receiving a simple commendation and a swift return to his dusty rock of a base, he'd been invited to the Imperial Palace on Zynar Prime, a phrase that, in alien diplomacy, apparently meant you are not leaving until we decide what to do with you. For 3 weeks, Joran had navigated corridors filled with whispering nobles, ceremonial meals that involved eating living jelly moss, and etiquette lessons taught by a stern tutor who kept sighing as if Joran's very existence offended the laws of physics. He missed the smell of engine grease, the sound of rain on metal roofs, and the uncomplicated hostility of a plasma rifle overheating in his hands. "Stop being so shy, human," Velara murmured, her voice low and melodic, like wind chimes forged from glass and silver. She rose from her throne in one fluid motion and descended the dais, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. The courtiers froze mid-whisper, their elongated blue faces turning toward the spectacle with undisguised curiosity. Joran stiffened, his pulse hammering in his throat. He'd been avoiding her gaze all morning, convinced that if he didn't make eye contact, she might forget he existed. No such luck. She closed the distance between them with a grace that belied her height, nearly a head taller than him, and reached out. Her fingers, cool and smooth, curled gently around his wrist. Before he could stammer a protest, she pulled him closer, her other hand lifting to brush a stray lock of brown hair from his forehead. The touch sent a jolt through him, not electric but strangely warm, as though her skin carried the memory of sunlight. "You stand as though you expect to be struck," she said, her violet eyes searching his. "In my court you are not a prisoner. You are unexpected and rare, like a desert bloom after a century of drought." Joran swallowed hard. "Ma'am, Empress, I'm really just a scout. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I shoved your cousin out of the way when that drone exploded. Anyone would have done it." "Anyone would not have," Velara corrected softly. "The others fled. You ran toward the blast." She tilted her head, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "And yet now you tremble at the thought of standing near me. Do I frighten you?" "No. I mean, yes. Not because you're scary, but because everything here is." He gestured helplessly at the chamber, the hovering servants, the ornate murals depicting galactic conquests. "I grew up fixing air recyclers on a moon that barely had gravity. This place feels like I wandered into a myth." Velara laughed then, a clear, ringing sound that made several courtiers gasp in surprise. Empresses did not laugh so openly. "Myths are just truths waiting to be lived," she said, still holding his wrist. "And you, Joran Vale, are part of mine now." Before he could process that cryptic statement, the palace's ambient hum shifted. A low, resonant alarm pulsed through the floor, vibrating up through Joran's boots. Velara's expression hardened instantly, the warmth in her eyes replaced by cold resolve. "Intruders," she said, her voice now sharp as a blade. "They've breached the lower shield." Chaos erupted. Courtiers scattered like startled birds, their white robes flaring as they fled to hidden alcoves or summoned personal transport discs. But Joran didn't run. His training kicked in. "Where?" he barked, his voice suddenly steady. "The armory corridor," Velara said, already moving toward a side passage. "Come. Your instincts may yet serve us." He hesitated only a second before following. The passage twisted downward, lit by pulsing blue strips embedded in the walls. The air grew thick with the tang of ozone and something metallic, blood. They rounded a corner and found 3 Zanari guards slumped against the wall, their ceremonial spears shattered, blue blood staining their white uniforms. Beyond them, 6 armored figures clad in matte black combat suits were prying open the armory doors with plasma cutters. "Mercenaries," Velara hissed. Hired blades. They seek the Heartstone, the core of our planetary defense grid. Joran scanned the scene, his mind racing. They're expecting guards, not us. We can flank them from the ventilation shaft. He pointed to a grate overhead. I've crawled through tighter spaces. Velara studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded. Do it. He scaled the wall with surprising agility, pried the grate open, and slipped inside. Minutes later, he dropped silently behind the mercenaries. Armed only with a broken spear he'd snatched from a fallen guard. Velara appeared moments after, wielding a slender energy blade that hummed to life in her hand. What followed was chaos, controlled, brutal, and swift. Joran used the spear like a quarterstaff, disarming one mercenary with a sharp twist, while Velara moved like a storm, her blade slicing through armor as if it were paper. When the last intruder fell, the corridor was silent except for their ragged breathing. Velara turned to Joran, her chest rising and falling quickly. A shallow cut on her cheek glistened with blue blood. You fight unusually well for a mechanic. I was a scout, he corrected, wiping sweat from his brow. That means I walked into trouble a lot. She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. You could have run. Again, you chose to stay. I don't leave people behind, he said simply. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe gratitude or something deeper. Before she could respond, a messenger arrived, breathless. Empress, the Eastern Shield is failing. They've deployed a resonance bomb. It's tearing the palace apart. Velara's face went pale beneath her blue skin. The nursery wing. My sisters are there. Without another word, she sprinted down the corridor, Joran on her heels. They burst into a wide hallway where the walls were already cracking, panels falling from the ceiling in showers of sparks. Two young Zanari women, twins, with the same white hair and violet eyes as Velara but softer features, were trapped behind a collapsed beam, trying to shield a group of children with their bodies. Lissa, Miran, Velara cried. We're okay. One of them called back, her voice trembling but defiant. But the ceiling. Joran didn't wait. He spotted a support column that was still intact and, using all his strength, shoved a fallen console under it to create a brace. Get them out, he yelled to Velara. She didn't hesitate. She leapt over debris, scooped up the nearest child, and handed her to a servant who appeared from a side room. Joran joined her, pulling children to safety one by one, while the twins helped the older ones crawl through the narrowing gap. The floor bucked beneath them as the resonance bomb pulsed again, its frequency tuned to shatter Zanari alloys. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. Then came the worst sound of all, the groan of the main ceiling support giving way. Joran, move! Velara shouted. But he was still reaching for the last child, a tiny girl with tears streaking her blue cheeks. The beam above him cracked. He shoved the girl toward safety just as the ceiling collapsed. Darkness, silence, and then pain. A sharp, grinding ache in his ribs. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Someone was sobbing above him. A voice Velara's broken and raw. Joran, please, don't leave us. He tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. His vision swam, then faded to black. He woke to the scent of crushed moon blossoms and the soft hum of medical drones. Sunlight, Real Zanari sunlight, golden and warm, filtered through sheer curtains. He was in a bed, layered in silken sheets, his chest wrapped in glowing bandages that pulsed with healing energy. And at his bedside, curled in a chair with her head resting on the edge of the mattress, was Velara. Her white hair was loose, her face streaked with dried tears. She looked exhausted, vulnerable. Nothing like the untouchable Empress of the throne room. He tried to sit up, but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. Lie still, she whispered, her voice rough with sleep. The healers say you'll live, but only because your human stubbornness refused to let you die. He managed a weak smile. I've had worse hangovers. A laugh escaped her, soft and surprised. You are impossible. And you're still holding my hand, he noted. She didn't let go. Instead, she leaned closer, her violet eyes searching his. Why did you stay, Joran? You didn't know those children. You barely know us. He thought for a moment. Back on Theta 7, during the sandstorms, we'd seal the hatches and tell stories to keep the fear away. One story was about a ship that crashed on an ice moon. The crew was stranded, freezing, with no hope, until a group of strangers found them. They didn't speak the same language, didn't share the same blood, but they shared warmth. And that was enough. He met her gaze. Sometimes, being there is enough. Velara was silent for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, "My people have spent centuries building walls between themselves and the rest of the galaxy. We feared weakness. We feared dependence. But you walked through our walls without asking. You fought for my family when you owed us nothing." She brushed a thumb over his knuckles. "You make me question everything I was taught." He squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." In the days that followed, the palace changed. Word spread of the human who'd saved the imperial heirs and defied death itself. The courtiers stopped whispering behind his back and began bowing when he passed. The twins, Lissa and Mirren, visited daily, bringing him strange fruits and stories of their childhood. They teased him mercilessly about his terrible taste in food. He couldn't stomach the jelly moss, and taught him Zanari proverbs that made no sense but delighted him anyway. But it was Velara who remained closest. She walked with him through the palace gardens as he healed, pointing out constellations only visible from Zynar Prime. She explained the history behind the murals, the meaning of the ceremonial dances, the weight of the crown she wore. And sometimes, when no one was watching, she let her guard down completely, laughing at his terrible jokes, leaning her head on his shoulder during quiet evenings, whispering secrets about her fears and dreams. One night, under a sky ablaze with twin moons, she stopped walking and turned to face him. "The High Council is demanding I choose a consort," she said, her voice tight. "They say the Empire needs stability. A pure-blood heir." Joran's heart sank. "Right, of course." But Velara stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "I told them I already have my choice." He blinked. "You what?" She took his face in her hands, her touch firm but gentle. "I told them I will marry no one but you, Joran Vale, the human who walked into fire for my family. The man who sees me, not the Empress, but the woman beneath the crown." He stared at her, stunned. "Velara, I'm not royalty. I'm not even Zanari. Your people will never accept me." "My people will learn," she said fiercely. "Just as I have learned that strength isn't in bloodlines. It's in courage, in kindness, in showing up when it matters." She leaned in until her forehead touched his. "And you, Joran, have shown up in ways no one else ever has." The wedding preparations began the next day, though not without resistance. Traditionalists grumbled. Diplomats sent urgent messages to allied systems. Even some of Velara's advisors warned of unrest. But the Empress was immovable, and when footage of Joran shielding the children during the attack went public opinion shifted. The people began to see him not as an outsider, but as a hero, one of their own. The ceremony was held in the Celestial Spire's central garden, beneath a canopy of living light vines that glowed gold in honor of the Union. Joran wore a tunic woven from star thread, its silver threads catching the light like distant galaxies. Velara wore a gown of white and sapphire, her white hair braided with moonflowers. When they exchanged vows, his in accented Zanari, hers in clear, careful Terran, the crowd erupted in cheers that echoed off the palace walls. But their peace was short-lived. Days after the wedding, intelligence arrived. The mercenary attack had been a distraction. The real threat was coming. A warlord from the Kethari hegemony, long thought defeated, was amassing a fleet at the edge of Zanari space. His goal: to seize the Heartstone and use it to power a weapon capable of extinguishing stars. Velara called a war council. Joran, now her consort and advisor, stood beside her. He studied the tactical maps, his scout's mind analyzing patterns, weaknesses, supply lines. "Their fleet is strong," he admitted, "but they rely on a single command ship. Take that out, and their formation collapses." "And how do we reach it?" asked General Torvak, a grizzled Zanari veteran who still eyed Joran with suspicion. "We don't," Joran said. "We let them come to us. The Spire's shields can hold for days. But if we lure their command ship into the gravity well of Zynar's moon—" "A suicide run," Torvak scoffed. "Not if we use the old scout tunnels beneath the palace," Joran countered. "I can get a strike team close enough to plant a resonance charge on their hull." Velara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You would go yourself?" "I know those tunnels better than anyone here," he said. "And I know how to make a bomb that'll crack their hull like an egg." Silence filled the chamber. Finally, Velara nodded. "Then we do it. But I go with you." "No," Joran said immediately. "You're the Empress. The Empire needs you." "The Empire needs its heart," she replied, her voice quiet but firm. "And mine is with you." The night before the mission, they sat on the palace balcony, watching the stars. Neither spoke much. There was no need. Their hands were clasped, their shoulders touching, the quiet understanding between them deeper than words. When the time came, they descended into the tunnels together, Joran leading, Velara close behind, followed by a dozen of their most trusted warriors. The air grew damp, the walls slick with ancient moisture. Halfway to the moon's gravity well, they encountered a Kethari patrol. A firefight erupted in the narrow passage. Joran took a plasma bolt to the shoulder but kept moving, planting charges along the tunnel walls to collapse it behind them. Velara fought like a banshee, her energy blade a blur of light in the darkness. They reached the moon's surface just as the Kethari command ship loomed overhead, its engines casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Joran worked quickly, wiring the resonance charge to a remote detonator. But as he did, a sniper's shot rang out. Velara cried out, stumbling. A bolt had grazed her side. "Velara!" Joran caught her before she fell. "I'm fine," she gritted out, pressing a hand to the wound. "Finish it." He hesitated only a second before priming the detonator. "Ready." She nodded, her eyes fierce. "For us." He pressed the button. The explosion lit up the moon's surface like a second sun. The Kethari command ship listed violently, its shields flickering out. Within minutes, their fleet began to scatter, leaderless and confused. The Zanari defense fleet moved in, cutting them down with ruthless efficiency. Back on Zynar Prime, victory was celebrated with feasts and fireworks. But Joran barely noticed. He stayed by Velara's side as the healers worked, holding her hand through the pain. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she said was, "Did we win?" "We did," he whispered, brushing white hair from her face. "Because of you." "No," she said, her voice weak but smiling. "Because of us." In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. The Zanari Dominion, once isolationist and proud, began opening its borders. Human-Zanari trade flourished. Cultural exchanges blossomed. And at the heart of it all stood Empress Velara and her consort, Joran Vale. A human who had walked into an alien court a stranger and emerged not just as a hero, but as a bridge between worlds. They would go on to have children. 3 daughters with their mother's violet eyes and their father's stubborn grin. They would raise them in the palace gardens, teaching them Zanari proverbs and Terran lullabies, stories of courage and compassion. And sometimes, on quiet nights beneath the twin moons, Velara would pull Joran close and whisper, "Stop being so shy, my love." And he would laugh, because he wasn't shy anymore. He was home. Peace, Joran soon learned, was a fragile thing, especially when built on the bones of war and the whispers of old enemies. The victory over the Kethari hegemony had been decisive, but not complete. Rumors began to surface. Scattered remnants of the warlord's fleet had vanished into the Vale Nebula, a lawless expanse where no empire dared send its ships. Then came the intercepted transmissions, coded, fragmented, but unmistakable in tone. They spoke of a weapon unlike any before, not one that shattered shields or melted hulls, but one that unraveled minds. It was Velara who first sensed the shift. She'd wake in the night, trembling, her violet eyes wide with visions she couldn't explain. Cities burning without flame, people screaming in silence, children forgetting their own names. At first, Joran thought it was trauma from the battle or the lingering effects of her wound. But when the royal seers began reporting the same dreams, and when 3 frontier outposts fell utterly silent, not destroyed, just empty, he knew something darker was stirring. The truth arrived not with a fleet, but with a prisoner. A cloaked figure was dragged into the throne room one morning, bound in null-metal chains that muted psychic emanations. The guards said they'd found him wandering the desert beyond the palace walls, speaking in riddles and weeping blue tears. When the hood was pulled back, Joran's blood ran cold. It was Mirren, one of the twin princesses, Velara's beloved younger sister. But this was not the bright, teasing woman who'd once fed him fermented star plums just to watch him gag. Her white hair was matted, her blue skin dull and cracked. Her eyes, once full of mischief, stared blankly ahead, as if she were looking through them, beyond the walls, beyond time itself. Mirren, Velara rushed down from the throne, falling to her knees before her sister. "What happened? Where have you been?" Mirren's lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, slowly, she raised a trembling hand and pointed. Not at Velara, not at Joran, but at the floor. A single word escaped her throat, hoarse and broken. Silence. The royal healers worked for days, bathing her in neural harmonics and memory-soothing mists, but Mirren remained trapped in a waking trance. It was Joran who finally broke through, not with medicine but with memory. He sat beside her bed, holding her hand, and began telling the story of the first time they'd met. How she tricked him into wearing ceremonial robes meant for a visiting dignitary, and how he tripped over the hem and spilled ceremonial nectar all over a very dignified ambassador. A flicker, a twitch of her lips, and then a whisper. You looked like a startled sand lemur. Tears filled Velara's eyes as her sister slowly returned to herself. But what Mirren revealed chilled them to the bone. She hadn't been captured. She'd gone willingly. The hegemony is gone, she said, her voice still weak. But something older woke up in its ruins. They call it the echo. It doesn't conquer with ships or soldiers. It spreads through thought, through dreams. It shows you your deepest fears, and makes them real. She shuddered. I went to find Lissa. She disappeared weeks before the attack. I thought she'd been taken. But she joined them. Lissa. Velara recoiled as if struck. Our sister? Never. She believes the echo can heal the galaxy, Mirren whispered. That by erasing fear, erasing pain, erasing difference, it can create perfect unity. She says the cost is worth it. Joran's stomach twisted. She's been brainwashed. Or convinced, Mirren said, her gaze distant. The echo doesn't force. It offers. And when you're tired of grief, of war, of loss, the offer sounds like mercy. That night, Joran couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony, staring at the stars, when Velara joined him. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her usual strength tempered by vulnerability. What if she's right? Velara murmured. What if peace requires sacrifice? Not this kind, Joran said firmly. Peace built on forgetting isn't peace. It's surrender. And Lissa, she's not thinking clearly. The echo's got its hooks in her. How do we fight a weapon that attacks the mind? Velara asked, her voice small. We find its source, he said, and we destroy it. But we can't do it with ships or soldiers. We need to go in quiet, in deep. The plan was madness. They would take a single stealth skiff barely larger than a shuttle and slip past the sensor nets into the Veil Nebula. Joran would pilot. Velara would anchor their minds against psychic intrusion. Mirren, still fragile but determined, would serve as their guide. The High Council forbade it. The generals called it suicide. But Velara, for the first time, ruled not as Empress, but as a sister. They launched under cover of a solar flare, the skiff cloaked in nullfield tech Joran had helped design. The Veil Nebula loomed ahead, a swirling maelstrom of ionized gas and gravitational anomalies. As they entered, the ship's systems began to flicker. Lights dimmed, screens filled with static images. Joran's childhood home burning, Velara weeping over an empty throne, Mirren screaming in a language that didn't exist. It's testing us, Velara said, gripping Joran's hand. Don't look, don't listen. But then the whispers started, not through speakers, but inside their skulls. You will fail her, the voice hissed to Joran. She will choose her people over you. She always does. You are weak, it told Velara. Your love is a flaw. Your heart is your weakness. Mirren began to sob, clawing at her temples. Lissa, she's in pain. She's so lonely. Joran slammed his fist on the console, forcing focus. We're not your audience, he shouted into the void. We're here to end you. And then silence. The nebula parted like a curtain. Before them floated a structure unlike anything in known space. It wasn't built. It had grown. A pulsating lattice of obsidian and light, tendrils of energy snaking through the void like roots in soil. At its heart glowed a sphere of shifting colors, the Echo Core, and standing on a platform before it, clad in robes of void black and silver, was Lissa. She looked serene, radiant, but her eyes, they were empty. Sister, Velara called out, her voice breaking as they stepped onto the platform via a tethered walkway. Come home. There is no home, Lissa said, her voice echoing with 1,000 others. Only the silence. And in silence, there is peace. You're not at peace, Joran said, stepping forward. You're hiding. From loss. From fear. From the messiness of being alive. Lissa turned to him, her gaze piercing. You of all beings should understand, human. You who lost everything when your outpost fell. You who buried friends in the dust. Don't you wish you could forget? Joran flinched. He had wished that, more than once. But then he looked at Velara, her hand reaching for his, her eyes full of love and fear and hope, and he knew the answer. Forgetting isn't healing, he said. It's erasing, and I won't erase her, or Mirren, or the life we're building. Velara stepped forward, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. Lissa, please, this thing is using your grief. It's twisting your love into something cold. We can help you, but you have to let go. For a moment, something flickered in Lissa's eyes. Recognition, pain, longing. Her hand twitched toward her sister. Then the echo surged. The platform trembled. Tendrils of dark energy lashed out, wrapping around Mirren and yanking her into the core. Her scream echoed through the void. Mirren! Velara lunged, but Joran held her back. It's a trap, he yelled. It wants us to rush in. He activated the skiff's remote detonator, a last resort plan he'd prepared in secret. The charges he'd planted on the hull during their approach flared to life, sending a shockwave through the structure. The core pulsed violently, its harmony disrupted. Lissa screamed, not in triumph, but in agony. You're killing her. No, Joran said, eyes locked on the core. You are. He turned to Velara. I have to go in. Joran. If the core is destroyed from the inside, it'll collapse. But someone has to carry the final charge into its heart. He pressed a small device into her hand, a neural anchor. This will shield you. Get Lissa out. Save Mirren if you can. Before she could argue, he kissed her. Hard, desperate, full of everything he couldn't say. Then he ran. The core's interior was a nightmare of shifting corridors and screaming faces. Memories made flesh. Joran saw his dead comrades, his parents, even a vision of Velara turning away from him in disappointment. He ignored them all, focusing only on the pulsing red center. He planted the charge. But as he turned to flee, a hand grabbed his arm. It was Mirren. Alive, but barely, her eyes wide with terror. It's in me, she gasped. The echo. It's rewriting my mind. Joran didn't hesitate. He slapped the neural anchor onto her temple. The device flared, purging the psychic corruption. Mirren collapsed into his arms. There's no time, he muttered, dragging her toward the exit. Behind them, the core began to implode. They burst onto the platform just as Velara wrestled a sobbing Lissa away from the edge. Joran shoved Mirren into the skiff, then turned back for Velara. But the platform was crumbling. Go, he shouted. I won't leave you, she screamed. The skiff's engines roared. Joran made his choice. He tackled Velara into the ship just as the platform shattered. The skiff shot backward, dodging debris as the echo core collapsed in on itself, folding into a singularity before vanishing entirely. Silence returned to the nebula. Back on Zynar Prime, the nightmares ceased. The outposts began to report normal activity. The galaxy exhaled, but the cost was heavy. Lissa, freed from the echo's influence, was broken. She spoke little, rarely left her chambers. Mirren recovered physically, but nightmares still woke her at night. And Joran, he bore new scars, not on his skin, but in his soul. He'd seen what true oblivion looked like, and how easily peace could become a cage. Yet, in the quiet moments, there was still joy. Velara never let him doubt her love. She held him through his own nightmares, whispered his name like a prayer, and reminded him daily that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to love anyway. Years later, when their daughters played in the gardens, laughing, arguing, building sandcastles that defied Zanari architecture, Joran would watch them and feel a peace deeper than silence. It was messy. It was loud. It was full of tears and tantrums and scraped knees. And it was real. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Velara pulled him close on the balcony, her white hair silver in the moonlight. Still shy, human? She teased. He smiled, wrapping an arm around her. Only when you look at me like that. Good, she whispered, leaning in. Then I'll keep looking. Years melted into decades, and the scars of war softened into stories told beneath starlit skies. The palace gardens, once silent with tension, now echoed with the laughter of children and the gentle hum of hybrid culture taking root. Joran and Velara never stopped building. Not just a dynasty, but a legacy of unity. Their 3 daughters, Sarah, Lena, and Tayla, grew up fluent in both Terran lullabies and Zanari star chants. Their skin a soft cerulean kissed by human warmth, their hair a blend of white and chestnut that shimmered in the twin suns. Lissa, after years of healing, found purpose in the archives, preserving memories so no one would ever again seek oblivion over pain. Mirren became an ambassador, her empathy forged in darkness now a bridge to distant worlds. And Joran? He traded his scout's rifle for a teacher's chalkboard, founding the first cross-species academy in the shadow of the Celestial Spire, where human, Zanari, and a dozen other species learned side by side. Valara ruled not with isolation, but inclusion. The Dominion flourished, not through conquest, but collaboration. Trade routes bloomed like desert flowers after rain. And every evening, without fail, she and Joran walked the palace ramparts, hand in hand, watching the sky they'd once defended together. When their grandchildren came, 12 in all, with names that blended Terran and Zanari tongues, they filled the halls with chaos and joy. Joran taught them how to fix hoverbikes. Valara taught them how to listen to the stars. On their 50th anniversary, the entire capital gathered in the Grand Plaza, not for a ceremony, but for a feast: roasted sky eel, Terran apple pie, now grown in Zanari hydra vaults, and fermented nectar that still made Joran grimace. He was old now, his hair silver, his steps slower, but his eyes still sparkled when Valara entered the room. She, too, bore the gentle marks of time, but her grip on his hand remained strong, her violet eyes as fierce and loving as ever. One quiet twilight, as they sat on their favorite balcony, blankets around their shoulders, shared silence between them, Joran rested his head on hers. "Remember when you told me to stop being shy?" he murmured. She smiled, tracing the lines on his face. "I knew you'd surprise me. And did I?" Every single day. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. The stars above, the soft laughter from the gardens below, the weight of a life well lived. It was enough. And when they passed, years apart but souls entwined, the galaxy mourned not with silence, but with celebration. Their story became legend, not of a human and an empress, but of two hearts who dared to choose each other across worlds, and in doing so, healed them both. And in the palace nursery, a new generation whispered their names like blessings, knowing that love, courage, and a little stubbornness could change the universe.